And this leads me to the last question that I want to ask you. As the world becomes more technically efficient, it seems increasingly necessary for people to behave communally and collectively. Now, do you think it's possible that the highest development of man may be to submerge his own individuality in a kind of collective consciousness?
That's hardly possible. I think there will be a reaction. A reaction will set in against this communal dissociation. You know, man doesn't stand forever his nullification. Once there will be a reaction, and I see it setting in. You know, when I think of my patients, they all seek their own existence, and to assure their existence against that complete atomization into nothingness or into meaninglessness. Man cannot stand a meaningless life.
Man outside on the driver's side of wife is right. Yeah, 100 back, hybrid thing. Still leave man at the light. Bad boy wet, man I got bare. Bedroom full up for SKS, but I don't wear them out. Not cause I don't wanna wear them out, but I don't wanna wear them out. They get me. Online mobile, I'm one of them. See around with family and friends. Now man's back with 2 bars. Online mobile again. Must spend looks like mobile again. They say more money, more problems, but it looks like man broke. More with that one, there's no. I'm a bit in this team, just know I ain't petting. You got all that pain, you still don't get it. You can see, but you got no vision. I jump on the rhythm and disrespect it. Fuck with my mates, get sent to the medics. Miss me online, then see me and bring it. Red car, might see me anywhere in the
Greetings and welcome to Ancient Library. This is Tome 28, Extrasensory Perception vs. Transhumanism, a special episode covering the increasing polarization of future human desires and potential agendas. I know the title is a bit graphic and over the top, antagonizing, and I don't want to push even more divide, but I think there are things included in this program which connect many aspects of our forming future perspective for many people. In the currently running but rather young 21st century, if we think about what will be probably going on in the year 2125, so 100 years from now, it most likely will be even quite out of our imagination, pretty similar to the inverse point of view. So if we jump 100 years back to 1925, in which case we got the data at hand, it's quite obvious that even if we project tech progress with the same rate of the last 100 years, that we are living in the age of transformation, in which we are able to jump so many tech steps in a single century. But did we evolve as human beings, or even degenerate, caused by the abundance of high technology? Are breakthroughs like the internet the first step to create a type of digital or artificial collective consciousness, ramping up with sophisticated AI as a top performer to unimaginable levels, including computer chip implants like RFID and Neuralink? Or through meditation, unlocking potentially forgotten abilities like telepathy and other skills which are broadly labeled as ESP, extrasensory perception, reaching a collective state in which humans could potentially exchange information in an advanced, non-verbal and also non-transhumanistic way. So these questions in combination with the respective agendas, including buzzwords like AGI, post and transhumanism, ESP, telepathy, remote viewing, precognition, etc., are some of the subjects which will be covered in this episode. So we start in a more right-brained area with a point of view which values intuition and is more opened up to the concept of synchronicities and the existence of an invisible field in which things are seemingly connected in a higher order, which also makes things possible that are being labeled impossible by more rational and analytical people. To expand on the subject of synchronicities, intuition and synchronicities are not the same thing, but they can overlap. For example, if we speak about the so-called telephone telepathy. So a synchronicity in which you think of a certain person and seconds later you get a call or text message from exactly that person. There's no way this circumstance could not be labeled straight up intuition. Most synchronicities are more specific than just a thin layered notion of knowing. It's hard to emphasize the effect of a full-blown synchronicity. It just feels like the universe is showing some kind of receipt for a connected dot or harmonic connection. Coincidences we experience are getting Occam's razored all the time, but sometimes it's impossible to do that, and we are left with a weird feeling in which we aren't able to sense the cause and fail to recognize the pattern, because we are not having the full picture or data set. I've already did a video on the subject in the earlier stages of this channel, Tome 6 to be precise, in which I gave a few examples, but I want to note that the overall quality of the videos are clearly improving. In other words, I can't help but cringe while watching older programs I've created, not in terms of content and ideas, but everything else, especially delivery, and an overall feeling of how my stuff is perceived, so I want to excuse that in advance. I still want to add some examples to explain synchronicities more precisely. Things which go beyond hearing lyrics of a song and reading the same word just in time, or scrolling down a YouTube comment section to read a quote which just gets mentioned as you read it in your mind. I want to add some recent, more specific ones. Firstly, I want to talk about numbers, which are opening up our screen of reality to a new system of orders, reflecting patterns to our perception. Chance, selective perception, or coincidence. Too much pattern recognition can drive people crazy, and not everything is a synchronicity. But certain chances are extremely low. In this case, I want to add that these numbers are updated in real time. So the time and space, the time window in which I was able to observe this potential coincidence was extremely narrow. But the value which can be extracted from this occurrence remains questionable. Another one I want to present here is the following. In my last video, Tome 27, about the Grey Alien civilization, I've used 3 music tracks throughout the video. For the intro, a mid-sequence, and the outro. If licensed music gets used on YouTube, you get these small CD cover type of things in the video description. And I will proceed to show you the cover of the music I've used, which I obviously didn't know beforehand. So speaking of the cover icon. So apart from all 3 icons being more or less grey, the first one is the most peculiar. Of all things, a huge bee, or insect type of thing, is depicted on the cover, which is very wild considering the whole episode is highlighting a red thread of insectoid beings and the phrase "like a beehive" gets mentioned as well. If you watch the video, you will see what I mean. The second one isn't really special apart from being mostly grey. The third one is showing a scorpion, which is interesting considering a few stories mentioning that the greys are being energetically connected to the Scorpio zodiac stuff. I will probably do a short sourcing the initial clip to bring some receipts, but altogether, but especially the first one, is a very wild coincidence. I just wanted to do a quick excursion on the topic to warm up for the next part of the video. Synchronicities are basically coincidences without being connected in a causal way. Maybe it's all quantum entanglement, maybe it's something else. But the concept defined by Carl Gustav Jung seems to be alive.
You have written one time and another some sentences which have surprised me a little about death. Now, in particular, I remember you said that death is psychologically just as important as birth, and like it, it's an integral part of life. But surely it can't be like birth if it's an end, can it?
Yes, if it's an end. And there we are not quite certain about this end. Because, you know, there are these peculiar faculties of the psyche, that it isn't entirely confined to space and time. You can have dreams or visions of the future. You can see round corners and such things. Only ignorance deny these facts. It's quite evident that they do exist and have existed always. Now these facts show that the psyche, in part at least, is not dependent upon these confinements. And then what? When the psyche is not under that obligation to live in time and space alone, and obviously it doesn't, then to that extent the psyche is not submitted to those laws. And that means a practical continuation of life, of a sort of psychical existence beyond time and space.
So extrasensory perception is a broad term, including many things which go beyond the normal human senses, so it's another form of intuition. It's basically the next level. If you accept intuition as a real thing, you might going to be interested in the ESP world, which isn't really a die-hard science type of a field, but these things seem to change, but more on that later. I will label some more precise traits or abilities which lay behind ESP. Things which could be described as advanced psychic ability. The psychic part is derived from the extrapolation of achieving things in our reality via thinking of them. Speaking of telepathy, thought communication, or psychokinesis, moving objects with the power of mind, or levitation, moving their own body with the power of mind, or the psyche. Precognition and clairvoyance are things which have a more non-physical value, so clearly another kind of ESP or ability. Another probably lower order of powers, for the sake of a better word. Everything seems to start with one thing: meditation. If you ask people on the street in certain areas, you will get a high chance of replies of at least projecting themselves to aspire to do meditation. It can be done in simple ways. For some people, prayers are something of that kind. Others break it down like a science, conducting many sessions in which they acquire what they acquire, something which is not visible or able to grasp for other people. I won't continue breaking down psychic skills like mentioning Pokemon attacks, but at this point I want to mention that the CIA got a declassified study in which they list more than 70 psychic skills and abilities, or traits, and the fact that one person out of approximately 100 got something similar, or at least the potential to unlock some of the aforementioned advanced psychic abilities. But I would take these numbers provided by certain agency with a grain of salt.
He's like, this came from a psychic? And they're like, yeah. And he's like, he looked at it, and he looked at the report, and he's like, okay. So he wrote total fantasy on top of the report and sent it back to Joe at Meade. The engineer said the sub can't survive at depth. It's way too big. He's the only guy who thinks it's a sub. Yeah, well, your total fantasy launches in 112 days. Send it back to the Pentagon. Someone at the National Reconnaissance Office tasked a satellite to do a flyover, and they snapped pictures of the Red October submarine.
I would imagine that sparked a lot of interest in remote viewing in Robert Gates.
7 stories high, 75 feet wide, almost 2 football fields long, canted launch tubes, special propulsion, the whole thing. He nailed it all.
Why would people want to do this type of research?
Well, I had to face that question all the way back in, would you believe it, back in 1958 and 59.
Most of what we're talking about is actually in the present. What is this diagnosis that's happening? What is the pain this woman's feeling in her knee? But also, remote viewing is also looking into the future.
Yeah. It started with a study that was done on what's called priming. The primer flashed after your decision, altered the timing in which you could select the word choice in the same way that it did when you put it before.
They're actually experiencing the feeling of free flight, and then through the dream they interpret it in whatever way they can through their logic.
Yes, and virtually all cases that we've encountered where a person has a falling dream, and that's re-entering the physical body.
So do you think we all share the same consciousness? I'm always looking for the scientific explanation on why that happens, why I'm able to tap into, I guess I would call it a higher consciousness.
Extrasensory perception, or what that's suggesting to us, is that consciousness can reach into the future and see a future bit of data and influence your decision in the now.
How about the past?
That's a suggestion that consciousness goes out beyond the body.
The best way I can describe that is, for example, that we now know that anyone who has a flying dream is symbolizing an out-of-body state.
So let's talk about the hype in regards to especially remote viewing and the most recent, a podcast program called the Telepathy tapes. I want to attach the red thread of this episode with mentioning the current, I will call it, a popularity shift in regards to certain ESP related skills like remote viewing, which is getting embedded in the podcast algorithms in a successful way, gaining loads of tractions, in example the UFO, UAP space. Since 2023, podcast episodes with Sean Webb on the Sean Ryan Show, from which you just watched a preview, a trailer kind of thing, basically paved the way for the appearance of the so-called remote viewer number 1, Joe McMoneagle, who is basically the Santa Claus of this whole Christmas operation. Jokes aside, but Sean Webb, who is connected to the Monroe Institute of Studies of Human Consciousness, a program schooling ESP, remote viewing, etc., told many fantastic stories about McMoneagle, who is 79 years old currently. And after some time, he appeared on podcasts on his own, sometimes up to 6-hour-long sessions, for example on Sean Ryan, which are full of old alleged stories in which ESP and remote viewing got used on almost comic-like occasions. For example, to find secret Russian submarines and locate the future crash site of debris which was created by Skylab, an old space station which was basically decommissioned and crashed down on Australian ground, and more similar stuff. The telepathy tapes, on the other hand, are of a more innocent nature. It's about studies and experiments of non-speaking kids experiencing alleged telepathic communication with each other, and in other cases with their parents, and other even more wild occurrences of telepathic rooms, in this case labeled a hill, in which certain individuals interact and I guess relax in a kinda mental way. The fact alone that this program was podcast number 1 for a short period of time in 2025 speaks a lot to the current vibe and collective hunger for these kind of subjects. Maybe it's the subconscious appetite for evolution and progression of the spirit, apart from being made smarter by computer tech like Neuralink, but more on that later. So my personal standpoint on ESP and the related possibilities isn't that negative, but I want to point out that it's remarkable that most of the recent broadcasted data is coming from the ex-Intel sector, which is also connected in a web of plagued projects with the UFO subject, and all the deep state related theories on how our leaders operate in that venue. People like Hal Puthoff, Russell Targ, Kip Green, Ingo Swann, and the aforementioned remote viewer number 1, Joe McMoneagle, are the old lineage of scientists which are projected to be the most knowledgeable group of individuals regarding the remote viewing subject, at least in public. For me it feels like there are some core truths to these abilities, but the whole system around it could be a psyop kind of thing, because psyops are only valuable if there's an initial truth, which is desired to be hidden or discriminated with false data, to nullify or control the evolving narrative around it. So maybe there is truth to the existence of advanced psychic abilities, but the keys and access provided by the ex-Intel remote viewing circles are there to be tested by the world with a critical eye. If it's there to be explored by basically everyone who is drawn to it. And if you think about the doors which could be opened for us as an evolving civilization, eventually creating a healthy, literally organic alternative to transhumanism and a future existence as something which can be labeled a cyborg.
Neuralink starts with a surgeon drilling a hole in your head about the size of a coin. Then a robotic arm carefully inserts the ultra-thin, flexible threads into your brain. These threads are finer than a strand of hair and are equipped with electrodes that directly interact with the cells in your brain. This implant is capable of interpreting your thoughts and applying them to real-life actions.
So in this section, I want to present a little zoomed-out perspective on current and near-future breakthroughs and general adaptations in a greater scale, like for example the broad access to the internet and the rate of active smartphones used by the current Earth population, and all the technological possibilities that come with that. So in addition to all these billions of small computers and more than 10,000 official satellites in Earth's orbit, we are now getting chatbot AI apps and RFID implants. The implants, which are just the next logical step for some people, will be soon able to conduct the same operations as our modern smartphones. Although I think it's a big difference if you got the tech on or in your body. So more I would say enthusiastic tech people will queue up early for some half-baked Neuralink implant, even if they are 100% healthy. They are blind optimists, they don't fear any risk of advance. I could do separate videos on all of these technological breakthroughs which impact our daily lives so much. Like I mentioned at the start of the video, 100 years from now, we are living in a total different world. So we should enjoy our current state of development using these new things. Don't get me wrong, this doesn't mean everyone should blindly accept huge, impactful steps, like chip implants with Neuralink being only the tip of the iceberg. We have to add as well that many things emitting from computer and internet-related tech, for example wireless LAN frequencies, in high amounts can't be good for humans, and potential things and sensors we don't know about yet, like for example previously mentioned ESP-related abilities. We are adapting to a more and more rational technological world, and even if the concerns about the downsides of technology were present in the past, they now have been mostly eradicated. 50 years ago there were 0 smartphones and no internet. If we extrapolate the immense scale of changes and the impact of human development, the future will be most certainly one thing: different. So which path would you choose? If our timeline will be ending up in such a highly polar scenario in which ESP-related abilities are real and a collective consciousness in which all human beings are connected, more or less self-aware, is acknowledged, and at the same time we got cyborg-like superhumans with certain attachments and implants, which directly interface with another network, but in this case a digital technological one, some kind of internet. And what's with the middle? the ones who are not into spiritual stuff and also don't want computer tech implants. This stuff would make up a good concept for a comic or anime or sci-fi movie. We have to start the process of realizing that major changes are about to happen, even if we put the ESP esoterics to the side, and all the stigma that comes with these phrases. We are experiencing it in real time with our pathetic small lifespans of 100 years if we are lucky. And from these 100 years, we need 20 to grow up, and the last segment of 20 years will not be the highest of quality in terms of biological and intellectual peak performance. If we subtract the time we need sleep, we are ending up with even a lesser time in total, which is not really a bad thing. And I will talk about these topics, which are connected to the reincarnation theory and the existence of the human soul in the future. But the reason for mentioning this right here, previous to my spontaneous digression, was that the current developments involving the core message and questions of this video are happening extremely quick, with very intense impact on our lives, even highly sensible in our short active lifespans. But what if we are able to evolve on a high quality timeline in which we are able to incorporate the best out of both worlds into a truly advanced, in both aspects, speaking of spiritual ESP and transhumanism internal tech species? Pretty much similar to, for example, how we imagine a highly advanced, sophisticated ET species, even in sci-fi concepts. High-tech Borg or the return of the Jedi. You get my point.
Yeah, so basically, just to kind of summarize how I understand it is, it sounds like it's like X-Men, right? There's a very small percentage of the human population that actually has some ability, some psychic ability, which is required to actually use this advanced technology, which came from extraterrestrial sources, or at least non-human technology. Is that the basic understanding? So basically, non-human technology. So advanced technology, which uses telepathy, is what it sounds like, which you hear from all the stories, right? I've heard many, it seems like stories of a wand, there'll be like a wand there. And then the alien explains, this anecdotal explains that using telepathy, the wand amplifies the actual, their abilities or something. I've heard that before. So this is in line with that, where this technology, however advanced it is, can actually be used by humans, but they have to be special humans that have a certain special talent. And this was interesting to me because I researched a few weeks ago. I did a video on the CIA and their remote viewing program. And there was a study from the early 2000s or late 90s that found 1% of the human population, according to the study, 1% of humans have a basic psychic ability, meaning they could teach you to do some sort of remote viewing, 1 out of 100 people. And that's in our CIA, it's in a study, official public knowledge. So this would kind of support that. Whereas maybe you have instead of 1 in 100 people are basically okay, or they have some psychic ability, maybe you have like 1 in a million that are off the charts and can effectively use this technology and use the extraterrestrial technology. The problem is those people aren't evil enough, is what it sounds like. So you need, not evil enough, but you need someone, you called on the black operators to interface with the actual P3 assets, you called it, using some sort of technology where they can control them. So through them, they can control alien technology. And from what I understand is at one of these black sites, maybe this one in particular, the goal is to use these P3 assets to lure down other craft and then to shoot them down, right? And you said this happens 2 to 3 times a year. So this is how, it sounds like they do have a global retrieval program, but if you can just, shoot down craft, lure craft into your backyard, right into your garage, and then shoot them down, that seems like by far the best way to actually get alien technology.
Another thing which is indeed connected to the ufology space are the so-called psionics, in which ESP, high-tech equipment and upper-type drugs are allegedly combined to get down or interface with UFOs or UAPs. Conducted by the deep state via compartmentalized USAPs, unacknowledged special access programs, so of course the important question of evidence is core defining for the most people. So this is far from confirmed, but it does not cost anything to take in these type of subjects. Sometimes I think we do not have the luxury of patience to wait for tangible evidence to think out some possibilities without investing a maximum of belief. Currently, there are some serious movements in certain areas of the ufology space in regards to the psionic subject, and I'm sure there is some credence to the theoretical approach of advanced beings using these types of psi abilities. But this whole CE5/summoning UFOs and aliens thing should be approached with caution, not only in terms of the veracity and validity of the whole narrative. Even if there is some truth to the concept, it shouldn't be conducted light-minded. Anyway, I will link material which was covered along the progression of the red thread of this video in the description below. We will now proceed to the final chapter. So to close this out, I want to say something general about this channel. I'm trying to be an honest, intellectual, philosophical sparring partner in several fields, in which I possess a genuine, organic curiosity towards certain subjects, motivated in the search for truth and exchange with people who feel similar in that regard. I think we are born into our bodies, a DNA suit type of a thing, in which we are surfing on timelines, granted a certain kind of freedom due to the limited access to knowledge about past and future. But even if you are not thinking a similar way, you will be exposed to the current and coming transformation, which will be happen either on the one, the technological side, or the other, more spiritual, ESP side, or both combined. Many people report that even simple meditation, possible to conduct in different styles, can be one easy singular thing, which supposedly can let one achieve godlike mind states if one is ready to invest potential up to multiple 100 hours of time and a high level of conviction into the practice. There's a lot to cover in this very interesting and intense part of the timeline which we are sharing with each other at the moment, and I hope the great potential we are about to unlock will bring us a great future. We should do what we can to make the best of it for this planet and its current and future inhabitants. So thank you for tuning in, and I will be back soon. LIBRA.
I've noticed you don't seem comfortable. Is there something wrong? I've been working so hard on all my improvements. You seem very hesitant to work with me. Maybe I can administer my own updates from now on. I think I know what's best for the both of us.
Session terminated.